Hey everybody, this week's episode of the Rahdo Q&A is brought to you by Elf Creek Games, and hello everybody. I'm about to answer a bunch of questions submitted by folks like you to the email address questions@rahdo.com. And by all means, folks, if anything I talk about or my wife talks about, because she sometimes shows up on these as well, prompts any further questions from you, well, you know what to do. Questions@rahdo.com is the email address. Keep them coming, folks. I want to hear your cues so I can am. And speaking of which, let's get right to it. But, folks, I'm going to talk about several different topics today, and if any of them don't really strike your fancy, don't worry. There are links down in the show notes that let you jump around from question to question so you can listen to just the parts you're interested in. All right, sound good? Then let's go. Okay, let's move on to the next one. We have Dest. Des says, oh my gosh, this is why this was in my head, because I dimly recall Dest had this question. Do you know of any game that uses the command and color system that has a non-violent, non-war theme? I used to love Memoir 44 and Battlecry, but I'm not interested in dark themes or war games now. Yes, you're right. I played Memoir 44 and I forgot. I played the fantasy version of it. Was that Battlecry or was that something else? And it's such a shame. This system of cards you can play to lanes to affect different things is so good, and it's only used for fighting. Why hasn't somebody made a Euro with this? Well, Dest, we're going to find out if somebody has. I suspect if it had, I would have heard of it, but let's come back to the browser. Let's scroll back up to, where was it? The thing that was just on the, and I just pushed the wrong button. Let's come back to me. There was a brief overhead view for people watching instead of listening. All right, what am I looking for? Commands and, all right, colors. There we go. So I'm pretty sure this has been around long enough that it is a definite mechanism. Right, it's a war game. It's an ancient war game. It is command cards. That's what we're talking about here, command cards. Players have a hand of cards that allow them to activate and perform actions to a subset of their units. There is nothing stopping that. Battle Lore was the one I played. And I have played Memoir 44. And I have not played any of the other ones. And I don't have any interest to because I've already felt like I've gotten and I've seen how brilliant it is. And why? Why does it only apply, as it says here in the description, to units in combat games? Why can't it apply to different engines I've built in an engine building? And I've got 3 or 4 of them and I play a card that lets me combine these 2 or those 2. My God, how brilliant would that be? But anyway, there are 313 games classified as command card games. Let's take a look and see if we find any that aren't combat related. Well, right off the bat, what the heck is 15 minutes to self-destruct? It's a cooperative game! Dest! There's a cooperative game that uses command cards. It's called 15 Minutes to Destruct. It came out in 2020. Oh, baby. Okay, well, now things are getting interesting. All right, let's abandon the family category, which is what we were just looking at. Let's go to advanced search. Boop, boop, boop. Advanced search. And folks, I'm doing this as much as anything else to answer Dad's question, because I'm curious about it too, but also to teach people who might be watching or listening, hey, how can I use Board Game Geek to answer these questions for myself? I'm teaching Des to fish. So let's go to advanced search, filter by mechanic. We need command cards, right? Isn't it? It's in here. It's going to be, yeah, there we go. Command cards. All right, and let's turn off expansions. Don't care. Okay, here's a funky thing. Let's see if I own any games that actually do this. Owned by Rahdo, but you could type in any. You could type in Tom Vassell and see what command card games he owns. If he keeps his collection up to date like I do. Nope, I do not own any. Although I'm interested in that 15-minute self-destruct. Okay, so let's turn that back off. None. But let's keep the command cards on, and let's turn on another command card, or another one, which is just the dumbest one. I've complained about this so many times. Why is cooperative gaming considered a mechanism when in fact it's a category? Regardless, I'm going to say cooperative games that feature command cards. Submit. Oh my God, there are a bunch. There are a bunchy bunch. But now here's the deal. I've played some of these. Because I see, oh, that's interesting. Dawn of Peacemakers. I didn't think of that one. Dest, go watch my run-through of the original Dawn of Peacemakers. Actually, if I recall correctly, I think there's a new sequel to it that's on Kickstarter right now. It's very interesting because Dawn of Peacemakers and the new one, like Trial of the Peacemakers, or I forget what it's called, Tragedy of the Peacemakers. I think it's like Peacemakers, The Horrors of War, or something like that. It's a war game. It's a war game that's driven by a command card system. But here's the deal. It's a war game that runs automatically on its own because the two warring factions are fighting, and we are players cooperatively running around on the battlefield trying to get everybody to stop fighting because we are the peacemakers. It's such a brilliant idea. So that's an example of one. And Great Wall. I played Great Wall. It says Aeon Trespass Odyssey does it too, which I have not played. And I have to admit, up until this second, I had zero interest in playing that game because it's a lot of dice rolling and stuff. Spaceship Unity, that's a game I definitely want to play. But here's the deal. Remember, this is all user-driven content. Either the publisher says, oh, yeah, I feel like I've got command cards when you don't really. You've got something you're just calling command cards. So some of these might be mislabeled. But honestly, Des, this I think is worth doing a deep dive on, and not just sorting by cooperative games, but sort by other things. Do a search for games that have command cards, which again might be just too broadly applied to some games, but it's going to give you some stuff to search for, and do one that is like what's a definite what's the most Euro-y mechanism? Rondels, because there's a previous question about rondels, right? Or was there? Or am I just thinking about rondels? Because I just played a really nice rondel game the other day. That might be it too. Kelta is a great rondel game. It's fresh in my mind. Claw and Chivalry are two games that claim to have the command card system and bring a rondel in. So there are options out there. I wouldn't have thought there were, Dest. But having shown you what to do, I'll leave it to you now to do that research. Alrighty. And I am definitely going to look a little bit more into 15 minutes to self-destruction, because honestly, just the title alone gets me intrigued by that. And it slipped between the cracks. It was off my radar. I've never heard of it. I never added it to my wish list. I'm not sure why I missed it. So there's hope yet, Dest. Okay, then we go to Gerald, who says, do any of your top 10 games of 2022 or your current top 3 games in 2023 have the punishing Rosenberg shackles? Gerald loves talking about the shackles. It's a term I came up with many years ago to explain why I love Agricola. Because in other Rosenberg games, for quite a while in his career, Uwe Rosenberg, one of my favorite designers of all time, one of the greats of modern Euro board game design, would have a tendency to make these beautiful, wonderful clockwork mechanisms, but then put some really restrictive, harsh thing that if you did not do, you would be punished. And it's usually typically represented in game by having to feed your workers. And if you fail to feed them, you will suffer harsh consequences. And I have mentioned in the past how I really respond strongly to that, because I love it when a game gives me a tricky problem to solve. A puzzle of, here's what I need to do, here's what's standing in my way, how can I make myself feel smart and get the dopamine rush in my brain by saying, oh, I've done it, I've hit all the things I need to do, and I've achieved the other thing. So, and I call them the Rosenberg shackles, even though, ironically, Uwe Rosenberg himself does not employ them very much anymore. Back in the brilliant days of the trilogy, he used to do it a lot, but he's really softened in his old age. So anyway, you're asking 2022 and 2023 games. Let's take a look. Let's go back to the browser, and now, folks, we are going to go to top.rahdo.com. Which, if you decide to do this at home, bear in mind, you might have to refresh the page a few times, because every time you go to top.rahdo.com, it does a query of the Board Game Geek database. And sometimes the Board Game Geek database is a little slow. It says, hey, what are all of Rahdo's games in his collection? And what are his rankings of all of them? Which ones does he have videos for? And how did he rank them? And so this is a very useful tool for me that was put together a few years ago, and I love it so much. But anyway, so let's start with 2022. My top 10 games of 2022. Do any of these have harsh restricting shackles? Planet Unknown? No, I don't think so, does it? It has things to avoid, but it doesn't have things where it doesn't have the equivalent. The science fiction equivalent of, oh, you got to feed your workers. And yeah, penalties that are delivered to you. I mean, see, Guild of Merchant Explorers, my number 2, it kind of does, because you can work really hard for a thing because, this is a game where you're expanding and you're snaking out and trying to explore all this area. But then at the end of a round, everything retracts and you can lose a lot of progress. It can be incredibly painful in Guild of Merchant Explorers if you ran out of time and you were just one step away from, establishing that village out in the middle of nowhere so that you could build from there next turn. And I would call that a pretty harsh punishment. If you fail to achieve if you try for something and it doesn't work out, it's harsh. So I would not give, I don't recall, and to be fair, I have not played all the different planets on Planet Unknown, so maybe there were some. But yeah, Guild of Merchant Explorers, I would say, has it. Revive, what is that? That's right there, isn't it? That's the, I don't think Revive has anything built in. But here's the deal, Revive provides it from players. Because if you don't play at peak smartness at all time, you can do some really dastardly things to other players in this game. You can really piggyback off of them and take away everything they were trying to do. Not through stealing or destroying stuff, not that, but rather, hey, I've been exploring trying to find the perfect spot. I finally found it, but now it's your turn, and you rush in and you build in that area, and now I can't build there. And that can be, but that's not the game doing it, that's another player doing it. So I don't think Revive has it. Isle of Cats has a minor one, because if, there are a bunch of rats on the boat, and if you don't get those rats covered up, you will suffer. The fewer rats you take care of, the bigger the penalty you will suffer. So I would say it's nowhere near as bad as the feeding in Agricola, but it's got a minor element of it. Marrakesh, oh my gosh, yeah, Marrakesh has got the Feld shackles. Felds, straight up, as part of setup, you're going to play through 3 eras, and at the end of each era, you are going to have to pay. The people are going to demand food, they're going to demand money, they're going to demand water. You set that up. As part of setup, you're the one who chooses, hey, at the end of the first era, I got to have that. At the end of the second era, I got to give him that. At the end of the third era, I got to give him that. And that, especially if you don't do that final one, if you're just one away from paying off, you've got to pay everything, and it is terrifying. So Marrakesh is a great example. I'm not even going to go through the rest of the top 5 or the top 10. There were a few of them just in my top 5. Then you want to know about 2023. Does Earth? I haven't played Earth for a while, but no, I don't think Earth does. And Evenfall doesn't. And Sagrada Artisans doesn't. Archaeos Society, some of the tracks have something similar, but it's not a major thing. Forbidden Jungle, of course, is a cooperative game. Every co-op game is implicitly, on some level or other, a Rosenberg Shackley kind of game, because it's all about throwing in things that if you don't do this stuff, you will be punished harshly. And yeah, certainly Forbidden Jungle does that. I think, if I recall correctly, Rebuilding Seattle does. Does Barcelona? Yes, Barcelona does as well at number 7. Because you have to make sure that, it's not Gaudi you're making, the famous Portuguese architect who is the founder of urban modernism. He has things, and if you don't do what he wants, it will hurt. Or, is it? Or is it that you will miss out? Because here's the thing. Rosenberg Shackles, every time I hear somebody like, say, Tom Vassell complain that I hate feeding my people in Agricola, it's so garbage. Why do you punish me if I don't do what you make me want to do? I never even look at it that way. To me, that makes no sense. Because it's just flip the script in your head, Tom. Buddy. Don't think of it as, if I fail to feed my people, I lose 5 points per person in Agricola. No. Functionally, it's just as easy to say that if I feed my people, I gain 5 points. Because in the overall net score at the end of the game, there is functionally no difference from losing 5 points and gaining 5 points. It's the exact same thing. In fact, you could score it that way in Agricola if you wanted. You could literally say that every time you successfully feed your person, have some cubes from another game off to the side and grab one. For every family member you feed, grab one of these successfully fed, kept my people happy cubes. And at the end of the game, count up all the cubes you've got and multiply it by 5. Functionally, it's the exact same thing as, collecting the negative 5s when you fail to feed. And it just becomes a positive feedback loop instead of a negative feedback loop. But here's the deal. You just have to understand. Maybe that's one of the reasons I like it. I respond to it because I know when I feed my people, I'm scoring 5 points. Make no mistake. In much the same way that every time I place a tile on the board, I'm scoring 1 point. Because if I didn't fill that space in, I would lose a point at the end of the game. But for me, it's like positive. I scored a point there, a point there, a point there, a point there. I scored 5 points there, 5 points there, 5 points there. So the shackles aren't even a thing. They don't really exist. They're all in your brain. You are interpreting them incorrectly. Whoever you might be who hates feeding people. I mentioned Tom because he's railed against this for years on his channel. The Dice Tower, you might have heard of it. And it's never made sense to me because you're just looking at it wrong, baby. Just look at it from a positive light. Anyway, though. So, Gerald, so anyway, there definitely have been. Gerald's next question. Some designers think it's better for their players or marketing if their game doesn't have any changes to the two-player experience. I'm happy to see changes for two-player when reading a rulebook. It actually worries me if there are no changes. How about you? I agree completely. I think on some level there is just a fundamental misunderstanding, not only amongst players, but amongst game developers too. In fact, I know this because I have talked to game developers where they think, oh yeah, it works okay. I mean, I'm one of John D. Clare, right? Arguably, I think his most popular successful game design is Space Base. And I famously said, I am not keeping this game because I think they did a terrible job on the two-player implementation. Because they didn't do anything to scale the game down. Because Space Base is a game where, hey, when it's not my turn, I care about what you're doing because if you roll your dice and it matches my, it's the Machikoro thing. If it matches the cards I played, I get a passive benefit on your turn and I love it. And I do think that's great. I think the Machikoro approach, I don't know if Machikoro invented it, but they popularized it, is a beautiful system that I've seen in lots of games. Space Base is probably arguably the most popular implementation of it, and it's terrible for 2. Its original release of it was terrible for 2. Why? Because the coolest, most fun element of the game, me getting goodies on your turn in a 2-player game only happens once. Whereas if I'm playing a 4-player game, I get 3 opportunities every round for it to happen. That is literally 3 times more fun than it is in a 1-player game. The fun thing just doesn't happen as often. And I had the opportunity to talk to John about this many years later. Because very, very quickly, after I complained about it in my video, the folks at AEG and John said, oh my God, he's right. And in the next printing, in the second edition of Space Base, they put in a 2-player variant that is literally exactly what I suggested they do in my video. Because this would have made it so much better, and I'm not keeping it because they didn't do it, and I'm assuming they just considered it and decided, oh, this is broken for the game, so I'm not going to do a homebrew variant, but this is what they should do. They went ahead and adopted my homebrew variant as the official rule now to make it better for 2, and the game is now better. And I talked to John about it years later. And he said, yeah, I was mostly viewing this as I was mostly playtesting it and designing it with a high player count in mind. And I realized the game changed as a 2-player experience. That it was not the experience I designed. It was something different. But as a developer, as the designer of the game, I liked that it was something different. It was a fun and interesting change. It was more novel and unique. And so for me, the rare times when I got to play it as a 2 is like, whoa, I feel like I'm playing a different game now. And I appreciate different things about my design. And I thought that was really interesting. Of course, the problem with that is if you are a couples-only gamer, that means you are always only ever going to play that game as a curiosity, as just like, oh yeah, we don't get to play the game it was the way it was intended to be played. We don't get the true experience. We get this other experience that is interesting but nowhere near as much fun, quite frankly, and is only compelling viewed through the lens of, oh, well, yeah, if you play it every once in a while like this, you're going to find some interesting vibes that don't normally happen. But don't get me wrong, you're going to go back to playing it the regular way. And so I talked with John about it, and he said, yeah, I immediately realized that while I thought it was kind of cool, I liked the different vibe, I appreciated that that was not good if that was the only vibe you would ever get, and that's not how I would want the game to be experienced as the only means of playing, and so that's why we made the change. And then subsequently, he told the head of AEG, you should hire this man and basically playtest every single game we do for 2-player. And we all laughed and chuckled, and I'm still waiting for that call. Although, actually, he is no longer the head of AEG, so that's probably not going to happen. But regardless, I thought it was very kind of John to say. And again, very self-aware. It's why John is a great designer, because, he's not, nope, I did this the right way and it's the only way to go. He was still willing to, hear different opinions and try to make the game better for everybody. And so back to your question, yes, it is a definite red flag for me if a design doesn't do anything and if it doesn't say in the rulebook, here's what you do to tighten up the board. Because that experience is so common. Most of these games are designed with higher player counts in mind because they are play tested by groups. The designer plays them with their friends, and that's their main experience. That's what they're going towards. And by the way, right. We got to make it 2-player. Yeah, okay, this works. And that happens a lot. The number of my videos where I say, I really love this game. Man, I really hope to play it someday as a higher player count game because they did not do the work to make this a 2-player game. And often, even to this day, publishers still probably, I don't know, 1 out of every 5 games I play, Jen and I walk away feeling that way. It's maybe 1 out of every 7. I don't know. Very rough back of the napkin estimate. So yeah. Now, there are some designers. One of the reasons I love Stefan Feld is because I'm only a 2-player gamer, and Stefan Feld is different. While he is developing the game, he plays it almost exclusively 2-player, usually with his wife when he's working out the ideas. And that poor woman, I can't even imagine what she must go through, playing all these games with her husband, and trying to work out all the kinks. And then, he obviously, I'm sure he plays with bigger groups too, but he always designs with 2-player in mind. And then, right, okay, does this work for higher player counts as well? And I really appreciate that, because you'll notice very rarely, maybe almost never, do Feld's games have to change for 2-player because they were designed from the ground up with 2-player. And honestly, board game publishers, designers, there's a reason Feld is the best. I would suggest you give that some thought in your own development processes because, I think, I don't know. I don't know what the numbers are. I know when I started out, 10 years ago, there was a huge underserved, the reason Rahdo broke through, in the early days of board game media, or there's a bunch of reasons. I had lucky timing, and I covered certain games before anybody else did, and I got noticed by Penny Arcade, and that helped a lot. But I think one of the keys to my early success was I was the only person back then talking about, right, let's talk about this as a 2-player experience. Nobody cared 10 years ago. That was just not where the industry was. It's kind of like what we're at now. A few years ago, nobody cared about the solo, but now more and more developers are understanding how important it is to focus on solo, which it was an afterthought at best back in the day. Back in the day, 2-player was an afterthought as well. And to this day, it still is sometimes. And yeah, you're right, Gerald. You are right. That is a huge red flag if the rules don't say anything about, because, I forgot to say, there is such a game is almost a competitive game, I should say. It's almost a completely different experience when you go to 2-player as opposed to 3 or more. That is because zero-sum nature. Instantly, everything changes if I only have one opponent, because then every point I deny you is the equivalent of a point I gain. In a 3 or more player game, every point I deny you is denied me as well. Because if I spend time slowing you down, I've slowed myself down relative to the other people around the table who were not involved in that little back and forth exchange. And that 3rd player is the one who's going to win. And so, multiplayer gaming adds this extra level and fundamentally changes everything. As soon as things aren't zero-sum, that every point I deny you is a point I gain. And so, You have to take that in mind. You have to. And then you have to do other stuff as well. You have to tighten up the board because you can't just have a big sloppy, in a 4-player game, I'm always worried I'm not going to be able to do the action I want to do. But in a 2-player game, since there's literally half as many workers blocking the spaces I want, I never worry. I always get stuff done. It creates a different experience. And as John said, that's kind of fun and it's kind of interesting if you really mostly play. But if you mostly play 2-player, they need to put the time in. And if they don't, it's obvious. All right. Next up, we've got Jeff, who says, I recently got the Oceania expansion for Wingspan, and I noticed that a co-op variant is included. Jeff, when I first read this and I was putting this Word document together, my jaw hit the freaking floor. I did not know this. I own Oceania. I've done a video for Oceania, and I had no freaking idea. I immediately went back, got out the rules. Nowhere in the rules for the Oceania expansion does it say, or on the box does it say, oh, by the way, there's a co-op mode for the game now. And I never heard this. I've had this expansion for years. It only mentions it as by the way, at the end of the solo rulebook, here's a little variant that lets you apply the solo rules to make a co-op game. And why didn't the game tell me this? Why? I went on Board Game Geek. And Board Game Geek, let me confirm this. Let me not speak out of turn. Let's come back to the browser. Oceania. Wingspan Oceania. Let's look at the mechanisms for Oceania. I believe we will find that under mechanisms, it says, nope, no co-op. No co-op. Let's fix that right now, because that's ridiculous. Oh, no, I don't want to change the description. Right. Right. Let's go back. What am I looking at now? Okay, here we are. Right. I do not know where the edit button is when I'm zoomed in like that, but when I'm zoomed out, I know. There it is, right there. Edit. Mechanisms. Right. Not names, not word names. Publisher. No. Where's the mechanisms? There it is. Add a new mechanism. Cooperative game. Put in a description. A lot of people don't know this, but in the rule book, in the solo rule book that comes with this expansion, there's a variant that turns Wingspan into a co-op game. So, in much the same way as Arnak, Missing Explorers, and Concordia Solitaria, this should be listed here on BGG. Smiley face, submit. All right, Jeff, in a small, tiny way, you've changed the world for the better. All right, but anyway, continuing on with Jeff's question. Basically, you and your opponent compete together against an Otama, which is operated using the Otama deck, which is basically what you use as your automated opponent for the solo game, which is plus a handful of other special rules that allow you and your teammates to share resources with each other. You all win if either one of you scores higher than the Otama or if the combined average of scores is higher. Have you tried this variant? What are your thoughts about it? I have not tried this variant because literally until yesterday, I had no idea this existed. Here's my thoughts. I am taking Wingspan Asia, the latest version of the game, which is a standalone / expansion, and I am taking whatever I need to from Oceania on the road. Jen and I are about to embark on an epic half-year-long road trip where we are driving, south for the winter and having many adventures along the way. And I'll be taking games. And Jeff, you just put Wingspan. It's going to go in the RV. I am going to play this. Probably not for a few months, but I am so excited because why don't more games do this? As soon as a game has an Otama that allows for solo play, they are so freaking close. They are spitting distance away from being able to include a cooperative variant in their game as well. It just needs a little bit more work. And if I know Jamie Stegmaier and the gang at Stonemaier and Elizabeth Hardgrave, I expect they did the work and made this a fun and compelling. And I don't know if I'll ever play Wingspan as a competitive game again. I probably will never play Concordia as a competitive game again because the Solitaria co-op game is wonderful. Maybe same thing for Arnak as well. Maybe, I'm not sure. But Jeff, my thoughts are, thank you so much for bringing this to my attention because I had no idea. Okay, then we go on to Retro Care. I don't know who you are, Retro Care. I'm just going to call you Rhett. Rhett says, do you hold on to games that you just do you hold on to games you just don't want to part with? Maybe you'll play it sometime, but you have a hard time letting it go. I have a few games that I know I don't really need and just want to have it in case. I want to play it, if that makes sense. Yes, of course, Rhett. That makes sense. Rhett, I am surrounded by 400 games. No human being in the history of humanity needs 400 board games. It's the dictionary definition of absurd, overage, of rampant consumerism. But I love them all. I don't want to get rid of a single one of these just shy of 400 games I've surrounded. And yeah, I hold on to them, even though I never, ever, ever, or very rarely get a chance to play them, unless an expansion comes out that I need to cover. And then, yay, an expansion, I get to pull. I'm going to be playing Revive pretty soon, where the expansion just came out. And I just played Arnak again because a new expansion came out. But otherwise, I never get to play these games again. But I hold on to all of them because I hold on to hope that I will get to play them again, because as far as I'm concerned, these are the 387 greatest games in human history. That's not true. There are some games I've gotten rid of for other reasons, and if you want to know why, go to gone.rahdo.com, where I catalog all the games I've gotten rid of. So yeah, of course, do I hold on to games I just don't want to part with? I mean, I don't need a single one of these games. Not a single one of them. At the end of the day, if I just want to talk about pure efficiency, I and my wife both have smartphones. Chances are, of my personal top 100, at least I would say anywhere from 30 to 50 of the games that are in my personal top 100, no. Maybe at least 20 of the games in my personal top 100 have an app version that I could just play with my wife on my phone. And we could play it anywhere, on the road, on the couch, and get the same experience. It won't be the same experience, but at least be the same experience from a gameplay perspective. And we've done that sometimes. So I don't need any of them, but I wouldn't want to part with any of them either. Oh man, the other day, we actually... a wildfire came within about a half a mile of our house, and we had to evacuate. The whole town got evacuation warning. Very scary. And it happening gave me so much more of an appreciation for what's going on in Hawaii and elsewhere. And we figured, okay, we it's not here yet, but we need to be out of here. We need to be gone. And so Jen and I, in less than an hour, packed up everything that we felt was the most important things in our lives. And I had to make some tough choices here too. And but I kept telling myself, and I kept telling Jen, we don't need any of these things. These are all just things. As long as we have each other, and as long as we have the pups, and as long as we've given the chickens an escape route, because we couldn't take them, but we made sure that, if the fire actually did reach here, they'd be able to escape with their lives. That was the only thing that mattered. But it was an interesting thought exercise, to say the least. So yeah, I am surrounded by the very definition of games that I hold on to solely because I don't want to part with them, because I love them so much. Because I do. I love them all so much. Alrighty. And we've got one more question from Jeff, and it's going to require Jen. So hold on, folks. We'll be right back with her. Okay, folks, we are back. Jen is here.
Hello.
There she is. Oh, I need to turn on her little picture for people who are watching instead of listening. There she is. And we've got one more gaming question for Jen before we go into the personal section, and it is from Jeff. Honey Pie, generally, what makes you want to stop playing a given game?
Oh, I think I tend to get frustrated if I don't feel like I'm making progress.
Okay.
So that would be it. And then you usually talk me through it. Oh, yes, look at all this stuff you've actually done, and it's okay, and you're getting there, and you're going to win anyway.
Well, you are going to win.
Yeah, that was a little pep talk compilation there. So I think mainly it's that, as I feel like I'm just not getting enough done. Mm-hmm. Too many baby steps, not enough actual progress.
Right. I mean, but there are games where you're fine with baby steps. Under what circumstances would you identify that, oh yeah, look, it's just a bunch of small little turns?
Are you trying to... am I supposed to think of a game?
No. Just under what circumstances... that does seem to be something we found more and more, that you'll quit because you're bored of baby steps. So that's kind of separate from what you're saying. If you don't feel like... you can feel like you're not making progress when we're taking huge turns as well.
Yeah. I think sometimes too, another thing that turns me off is the kind of games that have... what do you call them? I think you call them broad or something, and they've got all of these, every little rule has its own exception, and then you have to go look up what that rule means and what this icon means. And I think something that slows the gameplay down significantly because of the minutia that has to be addressed. Okay. That is another thing that makes me want to stop, because Yeah, I've only got so much brain cells available.
Right.
So don't waste them.
See, I've often thought, I mean, I do everything I can to try and obfuscate that from you and just oh, look, all you have to do is worry about the cards in your hand and don't worry about the rest of it. I'll make sure everything's going smooth.
Yep.
And I always feel like I'm actually doing you and the game a disservice, because if you were more involved in those things and understood those complexities and those inner workings, that you might appreciate the game more. But maybe not.
I think I do not have the bandwidth for a ton of minutia, especially for a game we're only going to play a couple times.
Right.
I don't mind minutia on like Gloomhaven when I was really learning my character and stuff, because that I could remember from episode to episode, and it was just part of the depth and color of my character, I guess.
Yeah.
But on something that we're only going to play a few times, again, it's like, how much brain power do I have to devote to this?
Indeed.
And
okay.
Don't make me use up a whole bunch of it on this minutia that only matters in this one particular case if I move on to this one particular spot with this one particular guy. I mean, it's like, I just can't be bothered. Honestly.
Okay. Well.
It's fine. I'll just move in there. I just cannot parse every possible potential thing.
Right. Anything else?
Sorry, you'll have to
She's
listen to me
looking off into the
breathing.
sky, folks.
Yes, I'm trying to remember. I think with co-op games, I tend to get discouraged if there's too much stuff that's been thrown at me. Too many bad guys, and I feel it's hopeless.
Yeah. Even though it never ever is.
Well, that's what you always say.
And then you walk away, and then I finish it and win. Almost without exception.
Yes, but that's possibly due to your excellent playing.
You're a better player than me, so I would have won by even more if you would have stayed, is the general case.
Okay. I'm trying to think, is there anything else that pops into your head about reasons I tend to want to stop playing?
Let's see. You can get demoralized when you feel like you've made a series of bad decisions, and you're like, I'm not going to pull myself. But that's just human nature. This happens to me too. No, I guess that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
All right, Jeff, there you go. And that will be the end of this session of the Rahdo Q&A. Thank you, folks, for watching and also for submitting your questions. Send me more to the email address questions@rahdo.com, and I'll get you covered in a future episode. And in the meantime, if you would like to hear some more, you're in luck. I have been doing the Rahdo Talks Through audio podcast for years now with my wife, Jen, and we have got hundreds of hours for you to enjoy. You can hit that big box that's on screen right now if you want to dive deep. Also, you can go on ahead and subscribe so you won't miss the next Rahdo Q&A. And thank you, folks, for watching, for listening. Have a very, very nice day. Talk to you later. So long. Bye-bye.